Hi, I'm Kelly Drake, and today I'm doing a watercolor painting demonstration using resist techniques. A couple of the resist techniques I'm using are just a white wax crayon and misket, or masking fluid, or it's also called frisket. The wax crayon uses wax, of course, to resist the watercolor paint, and the misket is kind of a latex rubbery material that resists the watercolor. So that both ways you can create a highlight or an intricate pattern and know that when you paint over it that you're going to leave the white of the paper, which is really valuable when you're using watercolor paints. Okay, for inspiration I'm using this book of Japanese stencil designs, which has wonderful patterns and intricate designs that you can choose from for inspiration. This one, I really love the floral pattern with the leaves, and just looks like something I could do a lot of fun things with without copying it exactly, of course. So I'm just lightly penciling in some of these patterns that I want to use in my watercolor. And I'm using really light pencil marks, and I'm sorry if that's a little difficult to see, but that'll be better when I put the masking fluid on. I don't want a lot of pencil marks to be showing when I do my painting. So just finishing that up. And now I'm going to take a really cheap little brush, even though it has a nice point to it. It's just a hobby brush. I'm putting a little bit of liquid soap on it so that the misket won't stick to it and ruin the brush. So now I'm just getting a little bit of that masking fluid on and putting it on the inside of the pencil marks. Careful not to go over the pencil marks. I'd rather have the paint go there than have the pencil marks showing when I take the masking fluid off. So I'm trying not to protect those pencil marks. Now you can get a little better look on it. I changed the lighting here so that you can see the shine where the masking fluid is going on. This is slightly tinted, kind of yellow color, so that you can see where it goes. There's also masking fluid that's just white, but it's quite a bit more difficult to see where that masking fluid is when you're done. I like to see the pattern that I'm producing there with the brush before I paint. One good thing about the white masking fluid, though, would be just when you're choosing colors, you can see it as white as it's going to be in the end. This is going to be slightly yellow, as I said, so if that bothers you, you can choose white, and also there's some that's tinted kind of a light blue color. But all of this is going to come off in the end. It's not going to leave any yellow on your paper. Really important thing to remember is once you get the masking fluid on and it's dry, you have to paint and let that dry and then take it off immediately, because you don't want to leave it on your paper more than 24 hours or it'll be really difficult to remove. Okay, so now that I'm done with the masking fluid, I'm going to take my little brush and go wash it out really well with warm water and some soap, because if you leave that in your brush any longer than necessary, it's going to ruin your brush. So make sure to clean those out really well. Now on the left side, I'm going to do an example of using white crayon as a resist technique. So I'm using my same book for inspiration, the same pattern, but I'm just doing something a little different with it, moving the flowers around a little bit and doing a different composition for fun. This time I thought it would be best to draw in my circles first and then do the patterns inside, just to see if I end up with a little better design. The first one I just drew freehand. That's up to you, just what's the best way to work, and how do you end up with the pattern that you like the best and the composition that you like the best. Now I'm using really light pencil marks again, because when I put that wax on, it's going to protect the pencil marks if I put wax over the pencil, and I don't really want that. I want the white to show when I put the paint over, but I don't want a lot of graphite, and that's just the look I'm going for. So I'm keeping it light and just making sure I have everything the way I want it to look here. And now I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and knead it really well so there's not a lot of graphite left on it. And I'm just going to really lightly rub over these pencil marks. It's just a little more important to get rid of any excess or dark pencil lines when you're doing the wax resist, because the wax will protect those pencil lines. So I'm just going to really lightly go over, and not so that you can't see your design, because you really want to be able to see it still, but just enough so that if a little tiny bit of pencil gets through, it's not going to bother you later. So now I'm going to grab, I actually found that I could buy a whole box of white crayons on Amazon, which made me very happy, because otherwise you have to keep buying boxes of crayons and using the whites up. So I found this box of white crayons, and hopefully you can see this. I'm going just on the sleeve inside the pencil marks, or just to the side of the pencil marks, not right over the pencil marks, because like what I said before, I don't want to protect the pencil. I just want that design to get on there. And when the paint goes over the pencil marks, it'll hide those. You won't really see those very well, which is what is the look I'm going for. So now my crayon got dull. So I love this pencil sharpener. It's a Stellar pencil sharpener, and it has two openings, one for graphite and one for graphite and color. And it has the perfect opening for these crayons. Will fit right in there, and you can sharpen them really well and keep a nice sharp edge, which is important when you're doing an intricate design like this, to keep your crayon nice and sharp. I believe you could also use a white colored pencil, like a prismacolor, to do something like this. It just might take a lot longer to cover all the area that you want to cover. And with both instruments, the crayon or the pencil, I advise really doing a good job of coverage. Press hard, make sure that you really cover those areas that you want covered, because if you put it on too thinly, it's just not going to make a really nice white pattern like you want to see. You're going to get really frayed edges and kind of a thin look to it. Okay, now that I've pretty much finished my crayon, I'm just going to lightly brush off any extra wax or eraser marks or anything that's stuck to the masking fluid. Get that off there so it's all nice and clean. Then I'm going to take my wash brush and just dunk it in clear water and put it all over the right side here, over the masking fluid. And just get the whole thing wet so that it's nice and even. If I hold it at a slant to the light, I can see the shine on the paper, and just make sure there's no parts of the paper that don't have that shine on it. Now I'm taking my round brush, and I love this color. It's a Daniel Smith quinacridone violet, and it really bleeds into the water, which is fun to watch when you're painting, and it also creates some really interesting effects when you paint it into wet and wet. Now I'm going to take a ultramarine violet, a cooler purple, and paint that in on the edges, and just kind of let it go move around in the water. I'm trying to, as I paint this wash, I'm trying to kind of stick to the movement that I've already created with these patterns. And to me, it's so fun to see that pattern come out when you paint the color on there. So now I'm just cleaning up the edges. You don't want to leave puddles of water or puddles of watery paint on your painting to dry that way, because you'll end up with some what we call blooms, unless you want that effect. So I just carefully go along the edges, and I pick up the drawing board so that the water moves toward the edge, and I just go right next to it with that paper towel and pick that up. Now at the top and on the sides here, it's dark, which is good, but it's not excess water. it's more paint, so that's okay to leave. So I let that dry completely. And you know it's dry completely when the paper is completely flat. So you can look at that from the side, make sure it's flat. If it's still raised up a little bit from the tape, it's not completely dry, and you should probably wait or even use a little bit of hair dryer to dry it, which we do in class. Now I'm using my wash brush to get the left side wet over the crayon resist. And you can see that pattern showing up. It's even resisting just the clear water. Now get out my trusty round brush, and this time I'm going to go with some greens. I start out with a little terra verte, which is a pretty color, and it's not an overpowering color, so you can kind of work on your design here and not worry about it being too strong. You can always get strong with the watercolor paints a little later while the page is still wet. So just adding a little bit more paint there. And now I'm coming in with, this is a Daniel Smith olive green, which is one of my favorite paints. It's just a beautiful color. You can really get darks and lights with this color. And it also, the pigment really separates in the water, and so you get these really beautiful granulation patterns. Now I'm taking my, it used to be called rich green gold, but now I believe it's called green gold. It's another Daniel Smith color, and I'll just mention now I'm not getting anything from Daniel Smith for saying that. It's just one of my favorite watercolor paints. But the green gold is also beautiful. It's very vivid, and it granulates out as well. And now I'm using an undersea green, which goes really well with that terra verte, and it also, you can create more darks with this color than you can with the terra verte. So even though I started out with that, I'm going to end up with the undersea green just to create a little more contrast to this piece. Okay, just moving the paint around a little bit and getting the water off the edges. You don't have to put the paper towel on the paper at all, just right next to it. Get that excess water off so that you don't get blooms when it dries. And as you can see on the right, I did a pretty good job of that. Let's see, I have any blooms over there, or big watermarks. This is cleaning up a little more. And okay, I'm just going to let that dry and come back. And now this is completely dry. I'm looking at the purple piece on the right, and I'm seeing that there's some areas that need a little more contrast. So I'm going to cover the left side with a piece of paper and just tape it down just to protect it, to make sure what I do on the right side doesn't end up on the other side. I'm going to use my round brush and load it up with some of that darker purple paint and just splatter it on there. What's great about having the masking fluid on there is that you can do whatever you want as far as paint over the top, and it's not going to affect the white areas. So now I'm going to hit it over another brush and use a little bit of that quinacridone violet too. And I'm just looking to put some darks in there because my darks that I had before from that wash really faded, especially in the more blue-violet range. Also, it adds a little motion and some excitement to the piece. So as you can see, the paper totally protected the side with the resist crayon. So I'll just remove that and clean up the edges so that I don't mistakenly touch some of that paint and transfer it to anything else. So now I'll just let that dry, turn it over, and start working on the other side. Here also I want to add some more darks, and so what I think is kind of fun is to take my smaller round brush, and this is a really nice sable brush that I inherited from my uncle. And I'm just gonna use those patterns that I've already been using to create the design and use them in a different way now, in a positive color. So I'm using some of that olive green to reinforce that pattern and to create the darker contrast. I also created another pattern, introduced some dots up to the top there, and I'll probably go ahead and repeat those again too, just so that they make sense with the rest of the design. So just repeating some of the motifs that are already there and reinforcing them. And I think outlining these leaves, putting a little dark in there is going to bring them out and give them some depth that they didn't have otherwise. Just reinforcing some of that pattern that's already there and just having some fun with it, so that this kind of creates a whole nother dimension, another foreground that wasn't there. So we have kind of a background, middle ground, and foreground. I consider the foreground the darker color, the middle ground the white in this case, because the white is sort of a broken up pattern that the wax creates. And then the background is the colored wash. Now I think a little more dark color there in the middle of that flower will just bring it out a little more. It was kind of disappearing back there. So just adding some wet color into these areas. Now I'm using some of that beautiful undersea green to emphasize the pattern a little more. Okay, now we just need to make sure this is nice and dry, and it's time to remove the masking fluid and see the big reveal. I actually enjoy rubbing off the masking fluid. It rubs off so easily when you don't leave it on for more than 24 hours. And you really get to see that white of the paper come through, and your pattern is there, perfectly preserved under the paint. And at this point, if you wish, you can also put another wash over some of these areas to kind of knock the white down in a couple areas, or you can just leave it nice and white like it is here. But it's your choice. Just rubbing the rest of that masking fluid off, and you really need to make sure that your fingers are clean and dry, and that the paint is completely dry before you do this, so you don't smear paint around. Okay, we're all done. You need to gently remove the tape from the paper, and even though this is sped up so you don't have to see everything, you really do need to be gentle with that tape to make sure that you don't tear the paper. Now here you have two beautifully painted designs. Almost have a batik look to them when you're done, and you could kind of see the difference between the crayon resist and the masking fluid, and how the crayon resist gives it a little more of a organic feeling, and the Misket gives you a nice hard edge. So I hope you enjoyed the project today, and I hope you give each of these techniques a try at home. Also, please take a little time to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more like this. And if you want to know more about me, my artwork, and my children's books, please check out my website and my Facebook page.